Welcome everyone, welcome every panelist, and it's my pleasure to lead you through this conversation this early afternoon. Now, as Jean-Philippe mentioned, I'm also involved in one of the E4S research platforms here. We're looking particular, or what we really want to understand is, how do Swiss citizens perceive the role of Swiss business, but also international business, in tackling the grand societal challenges of our time? And Roberto, we may argue that the Swiss Post is Switzerland's largest logistics company with 60,000 employees. From the perspective of the citizen, the Swiss Post, as a public service company, as a confederation owned by the Confederation, has a particular responsibility when it comes to ensuring the sustainability of its services. And maybe to start this conversation this afternoon, could you share a little bit your perspective on what is the role of Swiss Post in ensuring sustainability, particularly focusing on mobility and logistics?
Thank you, Julia. First, let me give you just a sense of the scale of the responsibility in terms of what we can go do well, or we can be part of the problem or part of the solution. Swiss Post owns, for its role in logistics, just over 10,000 vehicles in Switzerland to basically do the distribution of letters, yes, but that's not the biggest part nowadays, and it's parcels. So it's 10,000, just over 10,000 vehicles that every single day go through 4.4 million households every single day. Of that, 6,000 are already electric. That's for the logistic part. And then on the scale of on the mobility, we operate 1,000 public transport lines with autopostale, so the buses, and we have for those about 2,550 buses. De facto, all of them diesel. So depending on how we move and what are the commitments that we will be taking over the next, we've taken and will be taking over the next years, and the actions that we will do, we will significantly shift the impact of logistics and of mobility in Switzerland. So I do think that the expectation is very high, and that we have a very high, very important role to play in making logistics and mobility more sustainable.
So I think it's fair to say that sustainability was at the top of the corporate and political agendas before COVID hit. Then there was a little bit of a delay, or it slowed down in the conversation, and it's now regaining traction, also enabled by COP26, that it's now back on everyone's mind. Dominic, your research is part of the E4S platform, Evidence-Based Environmental Policies. Could you share a little bit, what is this research about? How does it relate to the topic that we're discussing? And also, how has COVID affected our transition towards sustainability?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So really we're in a public debate on sustainability that is suboptimal, in the sense that, you know, we've recognized for at least 30 years that there's a huge problem with climate change. We're really literally driving in a wall. We're destroying our planet, and the debate is really riddled with lobbyists. So part of the people are lobbyists who kind of make up excuses for inaction. Then politicians who tend to have a political agenda and are a bit short-sighted because they want to have immediate results for the next elections. And you also have people with quite dogmatic viewpoints. And in this kind of uneasy blend, what we really need is a neutral, pragmatic, scientific approach. And that's kind of our ambitious goal of our platform on evidence-based environmental policy. So we're like a dozen professors from the three institutions. We work together really well. And our goal is really to approach concrete, pragmatic questions with an open mind. So we have to, you know, we are very grateful for the fact that we get these wonderful work conditions from the Vaud and Swiss taxpayers, and so we're kind of neutral. We don't have to sell stuff to anybody. We just, you know, we're just doing our job, paid by taxes. And so we can have a neutral, non-interested, non-biased kind of assessment of things. And so that's why we kind of we can fill this gap in the debate. And one thing that's kind of important is that we also want to come up with solutions that are pragmatic and that are implementable and that may gain political maturity. So if we have, like, you know, professors, we sometimes have this bad habit of being in an ivory tower and kind of coming up with kind of very complex stuff that are impossible to communicate. And that's not going to do the job. When we see of the CO2 law, many of the people here in the room thought that we absolutely should have accepted the CO2 law. Well, one of the problems was, of course, communication. And in that sense, we really also want to take communication matters into account and also come up with really implementable solutions that can have a political maturity. And so for this purpose, what we do is we have written a white paper, we do academic research, we organize conferences, seminars, etc. To come to your second question, I feel that I'm a bit lengthy in my explanations. So the second question on COVID, what has COVID changed? Well, COVID, I think it has opened our eyes on the fact that we can be much more efficient and sustainable and can get rid of useless mobility. In the sense that, you know, I co-organize some international online seminar series with top scholars around the world. We have several hundred people attending. It's of great quality, and it has, you know, and we can get rid of the whole carbon footprint of flying around the world, and it's all online. And this is really, I think, we have really learned to cut professional mobility. That's in some part of it is unnecessary. And we also, working from home can also be very efficient to avoid traffic jam, pollution. So we've shown that, for example, in a research project together with Jean-Philippe Bonardi, Bonardi et al. We have a recent publication where we have analyzed the impact of COVID lockdowns on fine particle pollution. And what we've seen is that we can build back better our society. It's possible. You have some countries that have managed to fight COVID in a very efficient way, to have lockdowns that have reduced drastically fine particle pollution without such a huge economic price to pay. So by good organization, we can really make big progress with sustainability.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And I think you're highlighting several important issues, how COVID has affected and had an effect on also environmental pollution. And Roberto, maybe to bring this question back to also the Swiss Post, I have read an interview with you where you state that you've reached 200 million parcels this year, which is a massive increase in also due to online delivery, also caused by the developments of COVID, where we could not do physical shopping. Most people were ordering their parcels now at home. Now, from an economic perspective, I would assume that this is highly desirable. From an environmental perspective, the question is online shopping, is this now positive or is it a negative development?
There was a recent study in Germany where they actually analyzed the question quite well, and the question is actually a transition question. You know, the final, let's say, state where a significant amount of the commerce will be done through e-commerce, which is, you know, in one way or another, the direction that we are taking, will probably, from an environmental point of view, a better state than what we have to do today. If you couple it with other type of observations and developments such as home office and so on and so forth. You know, the fact that people stay more at home, maybe 2 days per week, don't have to travel to the center of the cities or somewhere else. You know, at some point they will need to buy stuff, and so instead of having to go themselves, they will order from home, and that will basically even out the additional logistical effort that needs to bring the parcel to their home. Now, in the transition, obviously, you have both systems in place, the stationary normal retail and the one of e-commerce, and that's probably, although there are not many studies, I would assume that it's probably worse, not better than what we had without any e-commerce. But the direction of travel and the demand, it's unstoppable. So, and in Switzerland, obviously, but Switzerland is, a couple of years behind other economies from that perspective. So if you take the number of parcels per household in Switzerland, we are a long way away from what it's already the norm in the UK or in other countries. So if we apply that to Switzerland, we know that in a couple of years, we will be probably, somewhere double that number that you've mentioned. And so that's the direction we need to go, which means for me, to close that we need to think the systemic way of making the solution for logistics and e-commerce a much more sustainable one. If we let it just grow without a overarching concept of how that would be a sustainable logistics, then it might not end up being the best one. Logistics is a matter of platforms and a matter of systems. And so we need a high level of coordination in that platform and system for making sure that those are then more sustainable from an environmental point of view.
Thank you. So not an easy yes or no answer. It's not a black or white. We're probably in a transition, and maybe at one point, if we're full in e-commerce, this might even be environmentally beneficial. I think this is a good point in time to bring you into the conversation, Olivier. Your research revolves largely around this future of mobility. How can we ensure sustainable mobility? So a great fit with the panel as well. And Roberto just mentioned also the systemic approach and that we need to probably change logistic systems. And could you share your reflection about this and maybe what you've just heard about what Roberto shared, but also Dominic, when it comes to the future of logistics and mobility?
Thank you, Julia. So if I come back to this topic about physical versus online shopping, I think to me the key point is the filling rate of vehicles, and that could be for people or for goods transportation. And in a sense, if the people would travel to the city with the public transportation, we need good public transportation network to go there, but then it could be actually quite attractive, the physical shopping. But on the other hand, I would say if the delivery vehicles are filled up to capacity when they go to the different neighborhoods, to the customer location, I think here the potential is higher actually to really coordinate and consolidate the flows. And then the question comes about what vehicle to use at the right time and at the right place. And then here the important trend that we see is multimodality, so using different vehicles on different paths of the journeys. For example, like trains between cities to cities, and then smaller and greener vehicles for the last mile in urban areas. And for that, so we need this coordination. We need these platforms, these hubs inside the cities or just outside of the cities to transport the goods between the different vehicles. And how to synchronize actually between these logistics flows, between these different vehicles is an example question that we address in our platform. And if I come back maybe to what Jean-Philippe was saying at the beginning, so there is technology. Technology will help to decrease the carbon emissions. We've been talking about multimodality. We could think about alternative energies or, even new type of transport like cargo souterrain that will come in 10 years, hopefully. But will that be enough? Or does it have to come together with, a drastic change in the, consumer behaviors? And probably the answer is yes, right? So we need to understand how the customer expectations are evolving, and have my colleague Virginie Lurquin, who is really working on that, try to understand what drive the choices that the consumers make in terms of transportation alternatives, right? So it could be the price, but it's also the flexibility, the punctuality, the comfort sometimes. So that's also kind of an important aspect to understand. And also what we address is also, there is this new technology coming that will bring new solutions. And there are also new business models that have to be created, if we think about the ride sharing, vehicle sharing. So how do we implement all that? And also the market structure is evolving sometimes, and we need to understand also this aspect here. And if we think about the postal services, so the market has been gradually open since 98. So there is more competition and on the parcel delivery market. And so it could be seen as a good thing, but it has also some other effects, right? In the sense, like, if we just think about the number of vehicles on the roads, there might be more. There could be actually a multiplication of vehicles. Think about 2 vehicles from 2 different service providers getting to the same neighborhood to deliver one single parcel. This is not completely efficient from a global point of view. And I think also one question that we are reflecting on is, what should be the right balance between collaboration between the logistics providers and competition to ensure, a functioning and healthy market, but at the same time also trying to reduce as low as possible the carbon emissions, the environmental footprint.
Thank you so much, Olivier. And I think you brought up many topics, and I see Roberto, he wants to react. So I would like to bring this back to you, mainly because I think you brought up the systemic view, and then we hear Olivier bringing up this notion, do we need to move from competition to co-opetition in some areas, particularly when it comes to maybe does the Swiss Post need to open up its infrastructure for competitors? Does it make sense? Would it make even sense to share some vehicles so that we don't have the double load on road? What are some key challenges with this respect, Roberto?
Well, that's probably one of the most difficult topics to address, because I'm pretty much convinced that the way to sustainability in logistics is not a technological problem. We either have the solutions or we will have them within the next few years, not even 10 years, from a technology point of view. So the question is a purely question of mindset and of system. And the system is basically 2 dimensions. One dimension has been mentioned, the one of the market and the competition, and the co-petition maybe, not just competition. The other dimension is the regulatory framework around it, and what actually from a legal point of view is considered to be the space that we have at disposal for developing those solutions. If I think of today Post, 100% of our parcels and letters are CO2 compensated already today, 100%. So, and it's paid by us, so it's on our, we don't push that to the consumer. So the question is how to avoid producing it. So it's the question of the electrification, first of all, which is an infrastructural question. It's an infrastructural question where you need de facto to be able to share, if you want to build it fast enough, to share an infrastructure, especially the electric, basically the charging infrastructure. You need to share that infrastructure across more competitors. So that's one element that needs to be done, and for that you need a regulatory framework. Then the second question that you have is the one that was mentioned about the coordination of the system. Today, our volumes are basically, you already mentioned, the highest factor, the biggest impact is actually how full the trucks are. And our are 100% full. Basically, because of the scale effects that we have, we are already at capacity every single day on every single route. Now, if you defragment, the first effect that you will have for all the years to come is actually to have more players with lower volumes per transport. And that will create a significant amount of increase in CO2 emission. So the sequencing on how do you do that and when do you actually start pushing for cooperation versus competition, when do you put in the infrastructure, are all topics that needs to be analyzed from a very factual point of view. And the difficulty at the moment, I would say, in the debate is more that it's ideologically driven. And it's about, competition versus state, or technology versus legacy, and not about how does the solution look like, and how do we get over the next, as fast as possible, but definitely not over the next 20, but more 5 or 10 years towards those solutions. And that's what we need to work on.
several very important points. And again, I hear you highlighting this importance of we're in a transition period and it won't happen overnight. And there will some solutions that coexist at the moment until we'll find it will consolidate to the superior, hopefully also sustainable solution. Olivier, I hear both of you raising this notion of technology as a key enabler, hopefully, in transitioning towards the sustainable logistics and mobility future. How can technology help to improve logistic flows, and maybe to also link it back to what Roberto has said, how can it even help to avoid pollution in the first place?
Well, I think digitalization, definitely is an enabler for a lot of things. For synchronization of the flows, for cooperation. You have new type of transportation, but there are also, sometimes it's even simple things like I would say the self-collection lockers. You can eliminate some journeys, right? You have one single vehicle going to one locker situated, on a train station, and then the people are taking their parcel on their way that they would have done anyway. And maybe also I would say that the technology might help in consolidate some flows. You have some examples in Japan. I think the company Yamato is bringing parcels to the customers, but they also deliver pickup services. Like maybe waste collection for recycling use, or even luggages, for people that don't want to carry that. And then I would say here technology might help in having some aggregation platforms that would help to match the demand in terms of logistic flows to the available vehicles, dynamically in real time to the vehicles that are available. And so in that sense, that could be something that we could imagine. I think La Poste is also trying to investigate into direction. Is it something that you want to reinforce in the futures, meaning like offering more services to try to actually have an aggregation of the flows inside actually the company of La Poste?
We have actually, for instance, the lockers that you're mentioning, it's called My Post 24 in Switzerland. The number of those has increased massively, and the utilization of those has increased massively, especially during COVID. So now basically they are also quite at capacity. And we did recently, just to continue on what you said, we did recently a test on collecting PET bottles, so basically recycling. Now on the reverse logistics. Now you might think, oh my goodness, we do that in Switzerland since 30 years, so where is the advantage of doing that, right? But then when they analyzed, actually, it figured out that alone increased the percentage of people that would do recycling by 10%. So yes, convenience and coordination of flows on different dimensions for different type of products may increase actually the utilization of those services and diminish therefore the unit impact from a CO2 perspective or for a logistic density perspective. So it is quite important, and that's why I go back again to what I said. You have the technological and the market side of it, but there is a regulatory perspective to this which needs to be addressed, because if the regulatory framework does not allow for those services to be aggregated, or I take another example, somebody in the room might be familiar with that. What is public transport? Well, public transport in the law is defined in a way that on demand cannot be public transport. On demand is not allowed to be a public transport. Now, what is the best way to create more utilization of a vehicle is on demand. I mean, we know the sharing services and so on and so forth. But as long as the law does not allow that to be qualified as a public transport, then you continue to have buses that have a utilization rate of 30%, which is definitely not a good way of reducing the CO2, even before we go electric. But even when we are gone electric, that electricity needs to be produced. So better, we use a higher utilization of buses. On demand would be fantastic, but the law doesn't allow it. Therefore, it's probably better to do more e-commerce and bring the goods to the people instead of the people to the goods. So far. Maybe the day we can turn it on the other direction, then it would be better the people to go to the goods.
lots of food for thought, and I see questions coming in with this respect. So technology as a key enabler, but also not a silver bullet. It needs to be, if we talk about systemic change, everybody needs to somehow do their share. Please continue sending questions. We'll go to the Q&A right after my last pressing question, which is, we've talked a lot about economic and environmental concerns. And oftentimes when we talk about sustainability, we leave out of the equation the societal dimension. And particularly when we talk about digital, there is one topic emerging, and this is, what about digital diversity and inclusion? And I want to bring this back to you, Dominic, because you're also interested in your research in inclusion and social tension. This question, how can we develop sustainable technologies, maybe green taxes that, quote unquote, leave no one behind? Can you briefly share what are the major challenges we are facing when we're talking about this topic of digital diversity and inclusion?
Thanks so much. I understood the hint briefly that you stressed, so I'll try to be brief.
I do that with every professor. It's not against you.
Yeah. No, so the thing is, like, the problem about a lot of green taxes or about innovation as well sometimes is that sometimes they tend to be regressive in the sense that they would kind of benefit more the rich, and the amounts of taxes to be paid, for example, for a rubbish tax, so la taxe au sac, as we call it here. So the amount that would be paid for a poor household would kind of weigh more in their budget than for a rich household. And so for this reason, and that's one of the reasons why there is so much resistance against green taxes or also against some forms of innovation. Think of the Gilets jaunes in France. Think of the resistance against the CO2 tax or against the canton of Geneva that really kind of, like in Asterix, the last village of the Gallay that would fight against la taxe au sac in Switzerland. And so that's part of the problem. Are they right? Well, they're not, because this resistance to green taxes and to green innovation is misguided in the sense that it's all a question of implementation. And so, for example, if you have a green tax that would cost to a poor household 200 francs to pay the taxes for the rubbish sacks, well, if the money you take it and you redistribute it in a social way, and the poor household then gets 300 francs back, then at the end of the day it will be benefiting from the system financially. So, which means, so the key lesson here is really that many of these green taxes would have a tendency to be regressive, to favor the rich, but if we design it in a smart way, we can solve this problem, and we just need to combine it with redistribution. So if we compensate the losers, we can make it green and socially acceptable.
Very important point. So this idea of how to reduce social tensions by repurposing the money that we gain through these green taxes, also for the benefit of the broader public and society. So to the panel and whoever feels like he wants to answer this question, the most voted question is, to transition to an environmentally respectful economy, should we not address the elephant in the logistics room, in other words, overconsumption and the underlying mentality of endless natural resources?
I could try, but I'm probably the worst one in the room, because actually we don't drive that decision. We only provide the services to transport the decision, and this is one of the things that probably is less known about Swiss Post. Swiss Post, everybody thinks about, it's the people, it's about the population. We're basically 90% plus of our revenues, and therefore what we do comes from contracts from enterprises, from companies that have their link to the end customers. So, if you take all e-tailers, it's their business model that drives this consumption. We provide the service to the logistical services, but the logisticians in themselves can only act on a very small piece of the problem. If you take the entire footprint from an ecological point of view, I agree that consumption is a huge is the main driver of any product that comes to an household. Logistic, the logistic CO2 emission is probably in the few percentage points. The 95–98% of it is the product itself. So yes, you can try to do it like that, but I'm not sure how you would act on those policies from a logistical point of view.
Any other reaction from the panel on the question on do we need to talk about consumption or sustainable mobility and logistics?
I think both have to be addressed, right? Overconsumption, yes, we do have to solve that problem, but how much time it will take? And in the meantime, we also have to address, like the logistics part and, make as less impact as possible in this transition phase. So I think both have to.
Yeah, Dominic?
Yeah, so I guess the economist answer to it would be partly that we need a circular economy. And so how to get that? That would be, for example, different tax rates. If you sell repaired goods or more durable goods, more sustainable goods, well, you have lower taxes and you have higher tax rates on more wasteful goods or goods that are to be thrown away kind of soon. Another thing that, of course, that's my personal opinion here, would be that as long as we produce so much and we work so hard, we will also have a tendency to want to kind of consume in exchange for all our labor that we put in. So maybe if we could reduce working time and we go to a 4-hour week, we work less, we produce less, we consume less, and we spend more time for leisure with our friends and family, we would be a happier society, at least for rich countries like Switzerland. For poor countries, of course, it's much more complex. I agree.
I think you have the audience on your side with a 4-hour working day. At least you have me on your side. But Roberto, we have some ongoing discussions where many people want to know how exactly CO2 that is emitted by the Swiss Post is compensated, but also to elaborate a little bit on your sustainability strategy when it comes to mobility that goes beyond the electric vehicles.
Well, the main driver of our sustainability strategy is the electrification. I mean, it's clearly the main avenue that we will be pursuing, because from a technological point of view, that's what is either available or very soon available, so that we can act on it. Obviously, we are looking at broader alternative ways of driving, of powering our logistics with hydrogen, for instance, and we are actually testing those technologies. But if we want to have an impact that is really within the time frame of our commitments, which is that we will have a completely climate neutral logistics by delivery by 2030, and the entire company will be climate neutral by 2040. Then we need to use technologies that are already existing or very, very close to be available, and that's the electrification of our logistics. So we are, mainly is an electrification strategy. Then on top of it, from a service point of view, we are investing quite heavily in trying to develop circular economy solutions. We have actually created a division that does only that. And we are engaging with many of the players in Switzerland around what kind of services we could structurally offer to them so that they can profit from this circular economy logistic services. And the last one, obviously, it's more the more classical things around our buildings and being able to produce electricity, for instance, on our roofs and so on and so forth. We have already one of the largest solar panel installation of any private company in Switzerland, but that's not really the core of the strategy. The core of the strategy is on the electrification.
It's interesting that you pointed out, because there are also some questions coming up, and I want to redirect this question now to Olivier. about how sustainable are electric vehicles, and will the technology to kind of really recycle the waste produced from electric vehicles, will this evolve fast enough? What is your reaction to this?
I think we should do a whole new panel on that. This is obviously a complex question, right? I mean, electrification, yes, this is the available technology nowadays, so that's why we are using it. If we go mass scale about it, I mean, the question we raise about are we able to produce enough clean electricity? And probably we haven't solved all the challenges regarding that. So I think here we should also link that to the energy platform of E4S, that is treating these type of questions. Actually, how should we transition the production of electricity in the whole country? And waste management is also like the whole life cycle of the products is also a very important topic. Yeah.
Maybe just to give an example, on a concrete example. If today we would be able to have a sufficient supply of synthetic fuels, for instance, it would be much, much easier and faster to do the conversion, because actually you can use the same basic technology, just use then sequestrated CO2 from the atmosphere with synthetic fuels. But the problem is that there is nowhere any reasonable supply of synthetic fuels to do that. So I think that alternatives will come in the new sustainable economy as along their development, technological development. The key is to start moving away in a structural way and in a planned way away from fossil fuels, and not get stuck with the fact that there is only one. Yes, there is only one. And by the way, if you want to look at problems, we might not even be able to produce all the electricity that we want, right? We have the debate in Switzerland about shortages and so on and so forth. But if you stop already before you started, then for sure you will not get there. And we need to get over the barrier that we have at the moment. And we have to go away from the idea that it will cost us more. No, it won't cost us more. Once we have a transitional cost that we will have, but once the investment is done, the system will be as efficient or more efficient than we have today.
Mm-hmm. Again, so a point in transition, we're not, you agree that maybe it's not the full solution just yet, but it's a good step in the right direction, and we're at least moving away from fossil fuels. I would like to end this panel with one question that is to all of you, and these are your reactions to the current COP26. And if you have any observations, what is your reaction of the COP26 that is currently taking place as your concluding statements? Whoever wants to go first. Please.
Then I will make it as a humor note. I mean, we had all these people traveling to Denmark, right? So yeah, I mean, you could see that mobility, it has been discussed, like some people have communicated, they have taken the train to go there. I've read this morning, someone said, okay, it should have taken me 17 hours, it has taken 32 hours. So he said, I would like to have a more sustainable mobility, but we have probably to invest more in, coordination between the different train providers, etc. So I'm not sure that was like the most important topic discussed there, but it was part of it, yeah.
I would say that it took the modern economy about 150 years to build the infrastructure that we have today in logistics and in mobility. It's, what we're using today is basically something that has been conceptually developed somewhere at the end of the 19th century. So we have accumulated 150 years of assets. And it will take a lot of political will and a lot of pressure from the public society and maybe from E4S for that stock of assets to be recycled into more sustainable assets. So I hope that the commitment come, but we will need also to continue putting quite significant will, commitments and pressure from the economy, from companies and from public society.
Well, so 2 days ago, Nobel Prize winner Jean Tirole has spoken about that in Geneva. And so, one of the points he was making is that we economists or academics in general are often the bearers of the bad news. So we're kind of the gloomy ones telling things as they are, and that doesn't make us super popular. So politicians are also sometimes lobbyists. They like to invent the silver bullet. So aviation industry has for many years now told us it is fascinating accounts of innovation and that they've gained a few percentage points in efficiency of planes, which is true. But the demand has increased by more percentage points than the efficiency gains. And we all realize that by that, we won't solve the problem, right? So, I think it's very disappointing that in the last 30 years, politically, not much has been done. And it's all it's a question of political will if I had the magic solution, I would of course share it with you. But I think we all can be part of the solution in the sense that we should, in pragmatic small steps, do whatever we can to save the planet, basically.
So I think when we talk about sustainability, mobility and logistics, one of the interesting outcomes of this COP26 is that the first time aviation and shipping really is starting to make commitments. And now we may be very critical and say it's long overdue, and you're right, it's long overdue. But I think this is an important step, because these are very important industries when it comes to decreasing pollution. And I think they are now moving, and they're moving quickly. And again, it links back to the question that was brought up here: how much is technology, how much is business, how much is political, and how much is consumption? What I find interesting is there are now more and more airlines that actually have responsible flying initiatives that call the consumer to take the train and not short distance flights, which I find interesting, because why do you offer short distance flights if this is something that you're against? So I think, again, it will be a mixture, and this is something that we've heard in this panel. We're in a transition. We're not there yet, for sure not. But technology as a key enabler, that's what I'm taking away, and obviously the 4-hour workday. Thank you so much.